Hello and welcome to the third edition of Book Chat. Today we have Bela Bhatia with us, who is an independent grassroots human rights lawyer, activist, as well as a writer. Recently, her book, which is a collection of her articles over the years, India's Forgotten Country, A View from the Margins, came out. And it is a disturbing read. It's thought-provoking, and it just fills, I think, any reasonable, any sensible person with a lot of guilt for the way we lead our lives, the way we remain ignorant about how dispossessed live, or how much of injustice we ignore or we allow to happen in our country. So Bela is a kind of a person who I would call a conscience keeper. She carries this huge burden so that we can live unburdened lives. So thank you so much for everything that you do, Bela, and thank you for agreeing to talk to me.
Thanks very much, Ghazala, for having me here today in this conversation. I look forward to our talk.
Thank you so much once again. And I had actually, to be honest, I did not know much about your personal background. I just knew you through your work. But your book also introduced me to your childhood, your growing up years, your experiences. And I was wondering, from a childhood like that, you obviously had a peer group, and everybody imagines and dreams of a very conventional future, even if you want to do something dramatic. But as a child, we try and follow what everybody else is doing, maybe do a little better, but usually we follow a conventional lifestyle. So, can you talk a little bit about your growing up years, of your peers, what kind of dreams you had as a child, and how did you come into activism?
Well, my early years were in Begusarai in Bihar. My father was an engineer and he was working in the Indian Oil Corporation. So we lived in the township of called the Refinery Township. And as you may know, these townships usually have people from all over the country. Um, and this particular township was built by the Russians once upon a time. So it was a quite a beautiful environment, and I think I count myself very lucky to have grown up for my first 12 years, in that township, because typically, you have people from different parts of the country there. Um, Therefore, very early on, you get introduced to different cultures, different languages, different faiths. Like your parents are also intermingling, their friend circle is also like that. Then at school, again, you have this kind of a mix. At play, it is again that kind of a mix. So I think that was a very useful, I feel, introduction to India in some ways. And what I also, of course, particularly value is, the Bihar of those times, that even though, we were in a township, but our lives were very simple, not really like what the children today, like the kind of gadgets and so on that the children today have. So we played with whatever was available in the natural world, and there was plenty of space to roam about, and and so on. So it was that kind of a, quite an outdoor kind of a life. And it exposed me again, like living in Bihar. This was in the 60s. So I was there till 1975. It exposed me very early on to poverty, because 1967 was a famine year, and large scale mortality deaths have been reported from Bihar and Bengal at the time. And there used to be a lot of these very poor people who would be coming into the township, into our neighborhoods. So that is actually the first time I feel that I was introduced to poverty, because I remember a particular incident that my mother would tell me, that they, when these people would come, and on one particular occasion, when they would ask for atta, and then as children we would go, we would run to, hum denge,
Mhm.
main dungi, that kind of a thing. And then बाद में I remember, but my mother tells me
Uh-huh.
that मैं माँ से पूछती थी, I was asking my mother कि who are these people, and then my mother had replied that they they are poor. So that was the first time that I actually heard about poverty,
Mhm.
and I understood what poverty is. So as far as dreams are concerned, I mean, I don't particularly remember any one particular dream. I mean, I remember this, that at some stage, when people used to ask, what will you become when you become big?
Mhm.
I used to say that I'll become a doctor, and I'll take fees from the rich, but I will not take fees from the poor. I mean, this is some kind of something that one remembers. Though I was not really into science. I was more a arts person from the beginning. So that was the end of my dreams as far as being a doctor, a medical doctor was concerned.
So, how did you drift into activism and human rights work?
See, activism came much later. I mean,
Mhm.
it was in my post-graduation, which I did from Tata Institute of Social Sciences in Bombay,
Mhm.
in social work. So I was 2 years in the hostel there, and living in Bombay, as a young person itself, for the first time, you're away from your home, and you begin to participate in whatever is happening in the city. And that time, I remember my very first rally that I attended
Mhm.
was in Chembur. This was a women's group, and they were protesting against a suicide
Okay.
of a woman in her home. And they were saying that this was not a suicide, but this was a murder. And, that whole feeling of being part of a rally, of shouting slogans,
Mhm.
the something goes down your spine when,
Mhm.
you do that. So that was I mean, that was certainly, I feel, I mean, I recall the very first time that I participated in a public demonstration. And since then, I mean, I think even before that, I mean, um, I have had some kind of an introduction to the lives of the poor, because even during my undergraduate years, this was in Baroda.
Mhm.
I was working in a slum that time. I was assisting a doctor in his study. It was a longitudinal study of ICMR. This is
Okay.
the Indian Council of Medical
Correct.
Research.
Yes, sir.
So this involved, going to the slum and visiting the households in the slum on a regular basis. So I used to do that after college, for a couple of hours every day for a year. And I used to be paid 250 rupees that time for that.
Okay.
And that was also a very, I think, kind of a intimate introduction into the lives of the poor in an
Mhm.
urban setting. One got to spend time, one went into their homes, one talked to them, one saw what they were eating, how their infants
Mhm.
and little children were doing health-wise and so on. So that was my first introduction. And then later during my TIS years, of course, I mean, the rally that I mentioned is just one of many actions that I was part of during those years,
Mhm.
as well as the TIS coursework itself made one involved in court field work.
Right.
So there were various field sites that one was, part of during the 2 years. So it exposed me, I think, in a very big way to the realities, the ground realities, uh, in the country. Uh, and I say in the country and not only the Bombay area, because in 1984 Bhopal happened, and this was our batch which went
Okay.
along with the other juniors,
Mhm.
that we went to do the first survey of the Bhopal
Okay.
victims.
Okay.
So that was my first introduction to what happened during that tragedy. And this was under the leadership of Professor Parshuraman that time.
Okay.
And then during the Bombay years, Bhivandi riots happened.
Yes, towards the middle of, I think, 1980s.
Yes, right.
Right.
So again, I mean, Bhivandi riots, really exposed one to, because we went there, we spent a lot of time in those in that parts. We talked to a lot of families who were affected and so on. And then I also got to spend time in some Adivasi movements closer to in Maharashtra, like the
Okay.
Kashtakari Sangatna. So, these were various ways that one got introduced to what the Dalits, the Adivasis, the minorities were facing in our country.
You have been to a lot of parts of India. You have chronicled stories from the grassroots, not just Bihar, Chhattisgarh. You've spoken about Gujarat. You've spoken about Jammu and Kashmir, as well as the Northeast. But uh, why did you decide to move to Chhattisgarh? When did you decide to move to Chhattisgarh? And why have you stayed on in Chhattisgarh, especially southern part of Chhattisgarh? You are in the Dantewada region. Uh, so why this region?
Right. So, see, I first came to the region that I am in is Bastar. It's the
Mhm,
Bastar division, which has 7 districts.
mhm.
And Bastar became a site of a very intense warfare between the Indian state and the CPI Maoist uh, from 2005 onwards.
Right.
So you must have heard about the Salvajudum,
Yes.
which is a Gondi, these are Gondi
Yes.
words,
Yes.
which means purification hunt.
Hunt. Yes.
So where, a vigilante group was created in some ways
Mhm,
and funded, armed, um, and who were assisting
mhm,
the CRPF and the Indian Reserve battalions from Nagaland. And they had come and later they came from Mizoram.
mhm,
So there was this joint operation of the forces plus the vigilantes.
mhm.
And they were basically going from village to village in the Maoist stronghold areas. And the choice that was being given to people was that either you're with us or you're with them.
Right.
And large scale human rights violations happened at the time.
Right.
Like many hundred houses were burned. At literally at gunpoint, people had to leave their homes and run across the borders to Warangal,
Mhm.
to Telangana, that is.
Right.
Or many of them went to the jungles, and many of them, went with the mob because this mob would be around 300 or so.
Right.
So many of them went with the mob, and then they were placed in roadside shelters, which were ironically called relief camps,
Mhm.
Salvajidum relief
Relief
camps.
camp. Right.
Yeah. So actually, this was part is what is in defense literature called strategic hamleting, where the idea
Okay.
is to isolate uh, isolate the fish
Mhm.
from the river, so to say.
Okay. Right.
And this has been done before in the country, in Nagaland, in the late 1950s,
Okay.
and in Mizoram, for that matter, in the late 1960s. So actually, it is such a irony
Mhm.
that the oppressive phase
Mhm.
of the government during this phase was also tribals.
Right.
You know, the Naga IRB and the Mizo IRB being used to assist the CRPF and the local vigilantes, uh, engaged in the same kind of strategic hamleting. So
Basically
it is
pitting the tribal against the tribal.
exactly pitting the
Right.
tribals against the tribals.
Right.
So, already before 2005, I had become engaged in studying the Naxalite movement for my PhD.
Okay.
So this was in the mid 90s, when after, a few years of organizing work in a rural area in Sabarkantha district in North Gujarat,
Right.
where I was involved basically in, Sangathan kind of work or
Mhm.
land, minimum wages, and so on for a few years. And then some work also, human rights and peace work also in Iraq and Palestine. I got involved then in studying. I wanted to study ideology-led movements.
Okay.
So that is what took me back to Bihar.
Right.
And because the Bihar of my childhood had never really left me, and therefore, I wanted to have a chance to revisit Bihar with adult eyes.
Mhm.
So that is what took me back to Bihar, and I, started studying the Naxalite movement there for my doctorate,
Okay.
which was from the University of Cambridge, the Faculty of Social and Political Sciences. And I did that very extensively. Like I studied three Naxalite factions, the
Okay.
CPI-ML Liberation, Party Unity, and MCC.
Okay.
And this was in the mid 1990s.
Right.
And then after that, after the merger of uh, Party Unity, MCC, with
And
the
PWG.
PWG
Yeah.
in Andhra in 2004,
Mhm.
and the formation of the CPI Maoist, I thought I must also understand the work of the PWG
Right.
academically.
Right.
And therefore, I had also studied the movement in Telangana.
Okay.
So it's after that I got involved with Bastar, because around that time when I was just finishing my Telangana study,
Mhm.
this what I had described earlier, the Salvajidum,
Right.
I prefer to call it an operation,
Right.
even though the government posed it to be a spontaneous movement
Yes.
of
Yes.
the Adivasis against the Maoists.
Yes.
But I think ground reality has certainly shown us that it was a pre-planned operation, like several other operations
Right.
that followed, like Operation Green Hunt and others.
Mhm.
So, so what happened is that across the border,
Mhm.
this major, atrocities were happening.
Across the border from Bihar, you mean? You
No,
were
from
based.
Telangana, from Telangana.
Okay. You were then based in Telangana.
I was based in Delhi. I was part of the Center for the Study of Developing Societies there.
Okay. Okay.
And I was doing my research that time in Telangana,
Right.
trying to understand the history of the PWG.
Right. And this was in the late 1990s.
This 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 was in the 2000, after 2004, after the merger.
Okay. After the merger. Okay.
After
Right.
the merger.
Okay.
So so then it was the timing was just that. It was, late
Okay.
2004, 2005, 2006.
Right.
And that is the time, June 2005 onwards, that
Mhm.
Salvajidum was happening,
Right.
or started happening.
Mhm.
So then it was quite natural on my part to try to go to Bastar
Okay.
and try to understand this method of
Mhm.
used as a repression of the Maoist movement or the Naxalite movement,
Right.
which is strategic hamleting.
Right.
Because so far in my study in Bihar, I had found that encounter killings were used, caste senas were used in a big way.
Right. Like
Like
Ranveer
the
Sena
areas,
and Salnite Army.
exactly,
Yes.
exactly,
Yes.
to basically repress the movement of the poor.
Mhm.
And many massacres of the Dalits
Yes.
and the landless agricultural laborers took place, which is a simultaneous history almost, simultaneous, it's a parallel history along with the history of the Naxalite movement in
Right.
Bihar.
Yes.
So in Bihar, they use caste senas and massacres. In Andhra and Telangana, they used encounter killings.
Right. Targeted killings. Yes.
Right, right.
Right.
Extrajudicial killings.
Yes. They had a force also. The police, the Andhra police had raised a militia for that.
The greyhounds of Andhra have
Greyhounds.
been a
Yes.
model,
Yes.
yes, have
Yes.
been a model for others.
Yes.
So strategic hamleting was used for the first time
Mhm.
against the, Naxalites,
Mhm.
Maoists in
Mhm.
Bastar.
Right.
So therefore, academically, I wanted to study that. And all along, from my activist days in Sabarkantha and later, along with my academic work, uh, I mean, the earlier years were, of course, full-time activism. And later, when I got into academics also,
Mhm.
always sort of simultaneously, I have been involved with the human rights movement,
Right.
uh, like wherever I was. So in Delhi or in other states, so wherever I was, I used to participate with the local human rights group that was functioning in the region.
Were you also part of the
Mhm.
fact-finding group which went to study Salva Judum, based on which the movement was banned by the Supreme Court?
No, that particular fact finding I was not part of. But in 2006, I was part of another group that went there,
Okay,
which was the Committee Against Violence on Women.
right.
This was
Which
the
is what
CAVA
you
group.
chronicled also in the book.
Right. Yeah.
Right, right.
So then I was part of the CAVO team, and we
Mhm.
had documented excesses, especially on women.
Right. Women,
Mm.
in any case, are the worst sufferers whenever there is a conflict. I mean,
Very much. Yes.
they're doubly victimized by both sides. Uh,
Right.
what is now? You've been in Chhattisgarh since 2006, and you never left after that.
No, I would just like to correct that. I mean, from
Okay,
2006 to 2015,
right.
early 2015, I was coming regularly.
Okay, okay,
So till until 2009, I was part of CSDS.
right.
And then I resigned from my job there
Mhm.
and I became an honorary faculty in Tata Institute.
Okay,
And and then I used to, but during this entire period, 2005 to 15, I used to visit regularly.
okay.
And then January 2015, I shifted full time.
And what made you do that?
Well, see, actually, even in 2009,
Mhm.
when I resigned from my job in CSDS, the idea was to shift to Bastar
Okay,
because I thought that my personal circumstances were such that I didn't really need a full-time job. I
okay.
mean, I don't have children, and my own needs are very minimalist.
Mhm.
And my partner and I have been living more or less a nomadic kind of an existence.
Okay,
So therefore, I thought that I don't really need a job, a
right.
full-time job. So why am I here?
Mhm.
So I felt that it would be personally fulfilling for me
Mhm.
if I go directly to the ground, like my old days in Sabarkantha,
Right.
and I work on the ground and I use whatever skills I have, on the ground. Here was that I would like to go on the ground and do whatever I want,
Mhm.
वहाँ पे रहकर,
Right.
be stationed there. And so with that in mind, I had resigned in 2009. But
Right.
then that was the time when Operation Green Hunt was in full swing.
Right. I'm going to come to Green Hunt in 2 minutes.
Right.
But
Yes.
before that, I just wanted to ask you, go back to what you had mentioned. You also spent time in Iraq and Palestine. This was after the US war on Iraq had finished, and Saddam Hussein was still alive. Was that the time you went there, or you went after that?
No, that was the time when Iraq had, invaded Kuwait. War was impending.
Right.
And that time, actually, members of the peace movement in the West, there were many who felt that, we should do some kind of a direct action in the region.
Okay.
And I had friends in the peace movement. So that's how then I, along with my partner, Jean, we got involved.
Mhm.
And in London, I mean, so I also went to London. I had
Okay.
some savings. So I just used that and I went to London.
Right.
Then we became part of a small team of activists
Right.
who then negotiated with the Saudis as well as the Iraqis
Okay.
to allow us space on the no person's land
Okay.
between Iraq and Saudi Arabia
Right.
to set up a peace camp there.
Okay.
And
And
the idea being that ordinary people,
mhm,
I mean, the governments may be saying one thing, but the ordinary people do not want a war.
right.
And the ordinary people would like the governments to negotiate, but
Mhm.
not a war. The the Saudis did not entertain us in London at all.
Okay.
The
Right.
Iraqis did. So that is how then the advance team went to Iraq, and then we continued our negotiations, and then we were finally allowed, some space on the road to Medina. There's a place
Okay.
called Judaidat Arar. So
Okay.
this is 2 kilometers inside on the border. Uh,
Iraq Saudi border.
yes, yes.
Okay.
So then
Right.
we pitched, so we were there.
Right.
Our tents were there, and we were able to mobilize peace activists from 20 countries.
Okay.
So more than 250 people participated in that whole effort. So this was like physical. The idea was as though we are physically going to be present there. We are
Hmm.
going to take the same risk as the citizens,
Right.
of these parts. Though it was not exactly so because we were at the border and the citizens in some ways were more vulnerable because they
Mm-hmm.
were in the
In
cities.
this, yes.
Yeah.
But
So,
this was
yeah,
before the US started the air campaign against Iran. This was before Iraq. So this was before that time, before the war, the US war started.
right. So
And but the
we were
US
in place.
sanctions were
Yeah.
in place. But there were
Oh
sanctions.
yes. Oh
With,
yes. Yeah, yeah. The sanctions were very much in place. And so we were there from 24th December until the 20 around the 27th of January. The war
okay,
started on 16 January.
January, right?
So even after the war, we continued there. But
Okay,
then the Iraqis came and evacuated us forcibly.
okay,
And then they brought us to Baghdad.
right.
And then we were there in Baghdad for a couple of days in a
Mhm.
bunker. They had put us in a bunker. And then they moved us to Amman. During the war itself, we saw how it was a very targeted kind of war where
Yes,
they really uh, targeted bridges, they targeted the basic infrastructure of Iraq.
yes,
So we were witness to uh, Iraq before the war, and Iraq before the war was very well off.
right,
And Iraq after the war, when
right.
it was really reduced to, all the basic infrastructure was gone
Yeah,
of it.
basically a rubble.
No, so in a sense, in terms of a rubble, like the kind of rubble we see in Gaza, it
Right.
was not that kind of a rubble at all, in fact. It was
Okay,
where they had targeted the bridges, the electricity, the water, so it was that kind of targeting.
okay, okay.
So it was like completely, handicapping in some ways and taking Iraq back, many decades back.
Hmm.
Because in Iraq, pre-war Iraq, we never saw a beggar. Post-war Iraq, the inflation went 40 times or whatever number of times, and you could see beggars on the streets. People were selling whatever they had in their homes
Hmm.
because they could not buy even the basics.
Right,
Then because of sanctions also, like there was hunger was widespread,
right.
and children were the worst affected, and so
Yes.
on. Our team was the first team
Hmm.
that collected medicine and food, and there's only one road that connects Amman to Baghdad.
Right.
So we also went on the same, and they were bombing on that road.
Hmm.
So we also went on that road, and uh, and the idea again being a witness as well as taking the same risk,
Right.
breaking the sanctions by supplying this material, which was small. I mean, it was symbolic,
Hmm.
basically, this whole thing, but it was breaking the sanctions
Right.
by an international, a group which was international in nature.
How did you manage to finance this mission?
So this was completely funded by people. Like there were no big peace organizations behind this whole effort.
Okay.
And in fact, we incurred a lot of debts. The only persons for whom the Gulf Peace Team actually funded was the Indian team.
Okay.
Because, as I mentioned earlier, I was a member of the advance team.
Hmm.
And then once the camp was in place, I came back to India
Okay.
and then campaigned in within the country. And some 16 people were ready. And these 16 people were actually helped by the Indian government
Okay.
because of the campaign and so on.
Mhm.
Gandhi Peace Foundation was involved, others were involved.
Okay.
And then um, the Indian government gave passports with the validity of 6 months
Okay.
to some of the participants who didn't even have a passport.
Right.
And the tickets were provided by the Gulf Peace Team. So it was only to the Indian contingent. And
Okay.
then the Indian contingent, I mean, all of them, in fact, after the camp, was evacuated, they decided to come back to India. So
Right.
that time again, India flew them
Back.
at no cost
Okay.
back.
And when did you go to Palestine?
So after this, once we were breaking the sanctions and so on, we were that time based in Amman.
Right.
So in Amman, there are, there's a big Palestinian community there because
Right.
Palestinians are, a very large number of Palestinians are now in the diaspora.
That's true.
And then being in Iraq and this whole region, I mean, for me personally also, my awareness really grew about
Hmm.
international politics and also about the role of the United Nations and about, the occupation of Palestine and so on.
Hmm.
So since we were an international community, we really felt that we cannot go from here without also saying something about Palestine.
That's true.
So that is when then in March, April 1991 was the first time, was the first peace walk that we had organized from Amman to Jerusalem.
Okay.
And we were stopped in Jericho and not allowed to proceed to
Mhm.
Jerusalem. And that time we were just 20 of us,
Okay.
and we were detained in the police station for a few hours.
Okay.
So then that actually gave us that, it made us aware of our power in some ways, because
Mm.
this whole thing was splashed all over about the, members of the international community being detained, this, that. And then we realized that the next day, which was next year, which was 1992, which was the 25th year of the occupation, we thought we have to do something about that.
Mhm.
So then uh, after this, I'd come back to India, but then some of us went back in January 1992, and we were there for 6 months. And we prepared a really big event that time,
Mhm.
uh, action, uh, which was called Walk for a Peaceful Future.
Right.
And that was very clearly saying respect human rights, end the occupation, and two states for a peaceful future. And where we had involved the Israelis also, the Palestinians also, and the international community. And the idea was to walk for the 6 days
Mhm.
and demonstrate outside prisons, because there are a
Right.
lot of prisoners. But then again, the Israeli authorities, they allowed Israeli citizens to join us, but not Palestinians.
Okay.
And then as soon as we reached the green line, they stopped us. This green line is close to Jenin.
Mhm.
So from there, you enter the West Bank. So they
Yes.
stopped us, and they brought mounted police and so on. But this time we were many people, like 113 of us quoted arrest that time,
Okay.
and we were put in Israeli jails for 5 days.
Oh my God.
And with this clear writing that we have to leave the country by 15 July. I remember that was the date. By 15
Okay.
July, you have to leave the country. So that was my, and as an Indian, I must say that I got to see firsthand how the stand of the Indian government changed. Uh, the first time when we were doing that walk from Amman to Jerusalem, that time I had a great difficulty in getting a visa,
Mhm.
because till that time India had not recognized Israel. So a government person, a government official in Israel to guarantee for me. I mean, this was their process, and that is how I was able to get my visa. This was 1991,
Right.
but by 1992, India had changed, and in 1992 there was no problem in
Mm.
getting a visa.
Right.
And now, of course, we know,
Now things
how
are
close
completely
India
different.
and Israel
Yes.
are.
Yes.
Yes.
So coming back to Bastar and going back to what you were talking about, Operation Green Hunt, I first want to understand what exactly was Operation Green Hunt, because the government of India and then Home Minister Chidambaram had said something. There were different statements that were coming from the government, and what the activists were saying and what journalists like us, maybe I was reporting on it, a lot of contradiction between the two versions. And so the first part of the question is, what exactly was Operation Green Hunt? What happened then? And what is happening now?
Sure. So Operation Green Hunt, see, by around 2007 or 8, Salva Judum was on the decline. And in, in its wake came Operation Green Hunt. So Operation Green Hunt started in 2009.
Right.
And this started not only in Bastar, but it was in all the Adivasi uh, areas
Mhm.
in the mainstream India. So it was also in Odisha, it was also in Jharkhand.
Okay.
But it started from Bastar
Right.
again. And on the ground, actually, it was not as though it was that much different than the Salwa Judum.
Okay.
So it was like burning of houses and all had reduced.
Mhm.
But otherwise, in terms of, encounter killings, uh, in terms of, other excesses,
Mhm.
like picking people in large numbers,
Mhm.
in and jailing them, putting fabricated cases on them under acts. That time they were using the CSPSA, which is Chhattisgarh Special Public Security Act,
Right.
and then later they started using the UAPA. So that time, so all this was going on.
Mhm.
And so on the ground, actually, frankly, it didn't matter. You could call it Salvajadum, or you could call it Green Hunt.
Okay.
Or later on, there have been many different operations. Like
Right.
right now, there is Operation um, Kagar,
Kagar.
Kagar.
Okay.
So इस तरह के there have been many operations,
Right.
and actually, as I said, on the ground it doesn't matter. So
Okay.
on the ground, what are we seeing? That of course strategic hamleting, ended more or less
Mm.
with the Salvajudum's sort of decline, but then the camps continued for
Okay.
for some years, and then even later they sort of emptied out. Some people chose to continue staying there. Some people returned, and so on. And then, as far as all these subsequent operations that are concerned, that have since occurred
Mhm.
since 2009, and now we are in 2024, what we have seen is large-scale militarization. That
Of
is
the
one.
of the civilian population.
Large-scale militarization in the sense of actual boots on the ground.
Okay.
So you have a large number of paramilitary.
Right.
So today, I can't tell you exactly what is the number, but it was being said some time ago that it was over 1 lakh, paramilitary. And along with that, a lot of local forces. So as you know, the SPOs were banned by the Supreme Court
Right.
judgment,
Yes.
the Nandini Sundar,
Yes.
Ram
Yes.
Chandraguha, and Sarma Garu's, that petition. As a
Right.
result of that, and
Mhm.
Manish Punjam and two others were also part of the composite petition. So
Right.
then, after that, after the banning of the the SPOs were within, I think, 1 or 2 months, they were just the name was changed. So
Yes.
instead of
And they
the
were
SPOs,
integrated
it
in the
became
state police.
right. So
Right.
there was something called CAF, Chhattisgarh Auxiliary Force.
Yes.
I think it was literally a matter of weeks, if I'm not
Mhm.
mistaken. And so, except those who were underage, and there was maybe some who were underage, but most others were incorporated as CAF.
Right.
And then subsequently, there have been many local, many such local forces
Mhm.
where Adivasis have been recruited. Because, see, the whole idea was that don't recruit Adivasis. That was the idea, no?
Yes.
And of course, underage Adivasis. But at the same time, even earlier, there was nothing stopping the state from recruiting Adivasis in the police force. Because even earlier in Bastar, the
Mhm.
Adivasis were there in the police force.
Right.
So actually, the same pattern continued, therefore,
Mhm.
after the Supreme Court judgment also, that first CAF, and then later subsequent formations where Adivasis were given employment. So Koya Commandos, then Bastar Fighters.
Mhm.
Um, like right now, since the last few years, there's something called the DRG, District Reserve Guards.
Right.
So these are actually around 50% of them are made of surrendered Maoists,
Mouse. Okay.
and so on. So even the CRPF now has a special,
I know Cobra.
Bastar Battalion.
Right.
Cobras are, of course, part of the CRPF. They are
Right.
a more specialized force,
Yes.
considered to be more deadly, but they are part of the CRPF.
Right.
Then you have the STF. In North Bastar, you have the BSF, and so on. So,
Right.
we have many different type of forces in Bastar.
Right.
And on the ground, what we are seeing, I mean, you said what is happening now. So on the ground, what we are seeing is that the state, and when I say the state, I'm irrespective of the party in power.
Right.
So as we know, the Raman Singh government was in power for a very long time. After that, for one term, Bhupesh Baghel
Mm.
was in power, and now again we are back to BJP
BJP. Yes.
in Chhattisgarh. Uh, and likewise the center, I mean,
Mm.
what's been happening in the center. So irrespective of who was at the helm of affairs, as far as policy is concerned, the policy has remained more or less the same. I mean, there
Okay.
may have been a brief respite or a little bit of lessening of these atrocities during the time of Bhupesh Baghel during the Congress regime,
Right.
and they gave back some land that they had taken, which Tata Steel had taken in Lohandiguda, which is 20 kilometers from Jagdalpur
Right.
town. They'd taken some land for Tata Steel Company that they gave back. But other than that, more or less things have been the same.
Mm-hmm.
So there have been arbitrary arrests, large number of Adivasis in prison, uh, draconian laws, a law like the UAPA being
Yes.
used, and complete impunity to the armed forces.
Right.
So even though we have so many examples of fake encounters, and since January this year, the number has really increased because just before January, Amit Shah, the Home Minister, came in Raipur, and in his statement, he said that the Maoists will be wiped out by 2026.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, this has been said time and again many times.
Right.
But this time, what we are seeing, and even before, the forces have always enjoyed impunity in these parts.
That's true. Yes.
Yeah, but this time we can see a difference. I mean, even here, I mean, it's very bad. It has been very bad, but even
You
then, it's become worse
you
and
mean it's worse than
perceptibly
what it
worse.
was during Green Hunt?
Oh, yes. Yeah, yeah. So
Okay.
now it is perceptibly worse. So since
Okay.
January this year, I mean, we have had so many instances of fake encounters, and large number of I mean, even in encounters with the Maoists, large number of Maoists being killed.
Mm.
Along with this, of course, the Maoists also have been in doing their
Mm.
actions. So you have been having ambushes in a place called Burkapal. Again, 26 Jawans were killed by an ID blast, which Burkapal is a very good example of what happens afterwards. Like after the ambush, the police rounded up 121 people
Okay.
while they were sleeping. I mean, there was only one woman who was a non-Adivasi. She was actually implicated later in the case.
Mm-hmm.
120 Adivasis who were actually sleeping. I mean, I represented some 12 or 14 of them because there were many lawyers working on this case. And from the stories that I heard, they were all rounded up. So basically, from the place of incident, घटना जहाँ होती है, तो
Right.
उसके, in the radius of some 10 kilometers or so, they basically round up people. So Burkapal is a case where 120 and plus one later, Adivasis were rounded up and they were in jail for 5 whole years. They were under UAPA, and it's only after 5 years that they were acquitted.
All of them were acquitted.
All of them were acquitted
Okay.
because in most of these cases there is no
Case.
evidence, you see.
Right.
So that's the scene.
Right.
So right now, another important point that I would like to underline is that um, we have found that even though the government keeps saying that all this militarization is because we are tackling the Maoists,
Mm-hmm.
but actually we also find that this is a very effective tool of quelling all popular dissent,
Right.
even though it may be non-violent.
Mhm.
So, for example, in these parts, since 2021, uh, after three Adivasis were shot dead for protesting, there was a big movement that came up in a place called Silgir
Okay.
against these camps. So that group is called the Mulvasi Bachao Manch.
Right.
Then in the following years, there were these movements all over Bastar against big roads, because the accusation was that the government is making these big roads for mining companies.
Right.
And we want roads, but we don't want these really big roads.
Mhm.
And these camps that are coming up, it is basically that you're using these camps to
So welcome back, Bela. We had a power cut, and I think there couldn't have been a bigger reminder of where you work.
present situation of India is what has been called earlier heart of darkness.
So you were talking about the peaceful resistance by the people.
Right. So now this large scale militarization, the camps that are there, the security camps, like in these interior regions. So when I say interior regions, we are just blocking out the towns of
Right.
Bastar, and some districts have less presence. Like Bastar district has less presence, Kondagaon has less, but otherwise most of the other districts, you have camps now. Every 2.5 to 3-4 kilometers, you have a security camp,
Okay.
especially in Sukma, Bijapur, and Dantewada. So this is the erstwhile undivided Dantewada district.
Right. So
So
what is a security camp? What all does it have? It has the security force. It has, for instance, a CRPF camp would have the CRPF personnel there. What else does it have? And how big is a camp? How many people?
see, a camp can have a few hundred security forces.
Okay.
Plus, now the thing is, increasingly what we are finding is that the police thana is also inside the camps. So
Okay.
they are saying that this is for the protection of the police
Right.
against the Maoists.
Right.
But at the same time, if you put police thanas inside the CRPF camps, what it means is that the ordinary Adivasi who may have been, a victim of an atrocity, he has to go to the same CRPF,
Right.
to the same camp, for that
Right.
matter, from where the forces may have come, just to access the civil police. So even to lodge a simple complaint, it's
Mhm.
not possible. It is very, very difficult in these parts.
Right.
So then, in terms of justice, then this whole question of justice
Yes.
emerges, that because the scale of the atrocities has been really, it's been a really large scale, and all kinds of atrocities,
Right.
murders, sexual assault, rapes, and so on. But as far as justice is concerned, the justice uh, giving mechanisms are very poor.
Chhattisgarh government has had a reputation from Raman Singh's time of oppressing human rights activists, civil society members. We've seen the kind of uh, horror that Dr. Binayak Sen had to undergo. And recently now, people like even Sudha Bhardwaj, this whole Bhima Koregaon,
B60, yes,
BK 60,
BK60.
how difficult is it for you to function as a conscientious citizen in Bastar?
See, the thing is, it is difficult in the sense there is always a kind of a I mean, you're sort of living under the shadow of the gun, so to say.
Mhm.
So there is always that cloud of uncertainty. Uh, so you never know. I mean, what can happen anytime, and as far as the ordinary people are concerned, of course, it is worse.
Mhm.
Their daily lives are affected. There's no place which is safe for them. So
Right.
even in their own homes, I mean, there are so many instances I can tell you where even in their own homes, they have been like a bullet has hit a child or a woman and so on. So even in their own homes, they are not safe. So whatever people like us face, I mean, I think it's very small in comparison to what the people face. As I was telling you, a very large number are under the draconian
Right,
UAPA in
right,
Bastar. So while at the national level, we hear about UAPA cases which are more high-profile cases in some
right.
ways, but we don't really hear about the Adivasis, and a very large number of them who are under UAPA. Yeah.
But tell me about your experience from a human rights activist or a human rights lawyer's perspective. You must be walking a very thin line, because any kind of dissent or protest, even in a place like Delhi, the government or people, if close to the government, have a tendency of labeling as urban Naxal. And you work in the heart of Naxal violence. How do you walk this very thin line of keeping yourself safe and still fighting for the rights of the uh, oppressed?
Well, all I can say is that you keep walking. So you said, how do you walk the thin line? I think
Mhm.
it's just by putting one step in front of the other.
Mhm.
Because, I mean, of course, they have tried to stop us. They have tried to label us. They
Mhm.
have put all these labels, whether it be a Naxalite agent, it's called Naxal Dalal in Hindi.
Right,
So, like against me, they had put my photo on a leaflet and calling me a Naxal Dalal, and they had circulated it in the area. I was living in a village called Parpa in
okay,
2016. So they had circulated it in the entire area. So which is like, it's an invitation to actually to violence, no?
violence,
Because
yes, yes.
so that kind of a thing, and of course, not only me but many other activists, lawyers, the Jagdalpur Legal Aid Group. Then there have been journalists like Malini Subramaniam and others. Many others have been, especially the local journalists and other local activists. They have been persecuted in so many different ways from the time of Salva-Judum. And same thing for us also. I mean, they tried their level best to try to evict us by forcing our landlords to
Mhm.
evict us, causing problems in courts where we were functioning. I mean, Jagdalpur Legal Aid Group had to
Mhm.
suffer in that respect. And I mean, even to for me also, I mean, they've tried all these tactics. I mean, I'm like putting pressure on my landlord. I was living in Jagdalpur, and this was October 2015 when suddenly my landlord said that you have to move, even though I had a contract with him till the end of the year,
Okay,
and he didn't give me a good reason. And he was a tailor, and he had a shop in a very populous market area of Jagdalpur, Chandni Chowk area. He has a shop which is actually devoted to making uniforms, police
right.
uniforms,
Oh,
and so on. So one could sort of put two and two together. I was fortunate that I was able to get alternative accommodation. Once they had evicted others, they again followed me in 2016, and they, in the form of a rally, there was a big rally
mhm.
under the leadership of the Samajik Ekta Manch, which was a vigilante group again, um, and the Mahila Ekta Manch.
Mhm.
So they had a rally in the village, and basically they were pressurizing my landlady to evict me, and they circulated this pamphlet. And then, other than that, a lot of threatening letters were coming to the sarpanch of my village, and likewise in many places, like in Bijapur, there have been cases where slogans have been shouted by the pro or by the anti-Maoist
Mhm.
groups there.
So,
Um, effigies have been burned. Uh, I was covering a rally, a very big rally in 2017, which was organized um, by the Agni. Agni was another formation after the Samajik Ekta Manch. It was
Okay.
also a vigilante kind of an organization, unarmed vigilante. I
Okay.
mean, even Samajik Ekta Manch was unarmed, but these were vigilantes of a
Mm-hmm.
kind. They had organized this really big anti-Maoist rally in Jagdalpur. I mean,
Right.
more than 1 lakh people were mobilized. And they had already started pressurizing me. And because I also write on these issues, so I had gone to cover the rally.
Right.
Like many other journalists, I mean, there were many other journalists there. So I was also there. I was also taking photos and so on. Then they surrounded me and they started shouting slogans and things like that. So I didn't let that deter me. I continued to be there.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, uh, when it was all coming to an end, I noticed that there was a group that was following me wherever I was going. And then they actually, my mobile was in my hand. So they actually, you know,
Smashed it.
yeah, they snatched it. And that fellow ran. And I tried to follow and get my mobile back, but I couldn't manage to. Then I filed an FIR against him. And it was all very clear that it was by the sanction of the higher ups in some ways. And then in early 2017, I had come back from Bijapur. This was around January 20th, around that. And I had gone to Bijapur to assist the National Human Rights Commission. Um, and they were there to hear testimonies of women who had been victims of sexual assault, rape by the security forces. So I had gone to, just assist them in their
Okay.
task. They had asked my assistance and I had gone to assist. So I returned home, and that night itself, in the night around one jeep full of these same people came, and they were trying to get my landlord and me to come to till the road, and we refused. We
Okay.
locked ourselves in one room, and then we heard the vehicle leaving after 1 hour.
Okay.
And the village had very little electricity, so we had just one bulb above us, so they could see us, we couldn't see them.
Right.
So anyway, so it was a very vulnerable kind of a situation. Next day in the morning, I had just called and made appointments with the collector and the commissioner.
Mm-hmm.
And around 12 o'clock, I was still outside. I had just made the phone call. So my phone was still in my hand. When again that same vehicle comes,
Okay.
and then, these people, get down and they start threatening my dog, Somari. I mean, they
Uh-huh.
came, she started barking. So then they started threatening her. And then they said, we will isko kaat denge. So they started using that language. Then I
Uh-huh.
understood that these are not just visitors. I mean, these are some other people.
Yeah.
So then somehow, and then this force, they sort of chased after me, and basically saying that you move right now, otherwise we'll burn the house.
Oh God.
So I said, okay, I'll cooperate with you. And I went in. I said, just give me, it was winters. So I said, just give me some time. I'll just change my clothes. So I went in, I shut my door, and I used that time to quickly call the collector. And his number was right at the top because I had
Right.
just called him. And fortunately, he picked up the phone.
Okay.
This was Collector Amit Kataria.
Okay.
And he responded immediately and he said, I'll send the police. So in a short while, the police came from the Thana also. But then by that time, I'd come out and so on, and that there was already a rally in place and
Mm-hmm.
they were shouting slogans, things like that. But then there were 6 policemen who came, and then they immediately started taking the video.
Okay.
But then they were not trying to stop the whole thing in any way,
Right.
you see. And
Ah.
later, a clip of that video was circulated by Agni.
Oh, okay.
So then you can see the nexus between Agni and
Yes.
the police.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, so there was a big up. They took it in writing that I'll leave in 24 hours,
Mm-hmm.
leave that accommodation in 24
Right.
hours, that kind of a thing. So anyway, so it became a big uproar because it so happened that this was the 23rd of January, And for the 26th of January, Republic Day, there were some senior officials from Chhattisgarh who were in Bastar at the time. So therefore, these senior officers were able to come and do a on the spot inquiry in some ways.
Okay.
So therefore, it became a really sort of a big kind of sort of incident. And then after that, I said that, I'm not going to leave Bastar. And if one hand of the government has been causing me problems, harassment, and so on, and after every instance of harassment, I had been giving complaints to the collector.
Right.
I had filed 2 FIRs by then. So I said, I would, appreciate if I was given some accommodation, even if it's a garage, it can be anything, but I'm not moving out of Bastar. So they took their time, but finally they did give me on subsidized rent. I was given a 2-room government accommodation
Okay.
in a colony of government employees.
Mhm.
And so in a lane where there were others. So it was a kind of a, protective measure.
Right.
And for the first one or two, initially they even put some guards there, but I had
Okay.
given in writing many times, I don't want guards. And finally, those guards were taken away. So, because this was also the time that surveillance was continuing.
Mhm.
Like in 2009, I was also a victim of the Pegasus. Uh,
Yes, I saw your name in the reports
yes,
that had come out, right?
right.
But now, presently, where do you live?
So now I live in Dantewada,
Okay.
which is 2 hours from Jagdalpur.
Right.
It's the headquarters of Dantewada district. So
Yes.
I live
So,
here.
okay. And now you've not faced any harassment or threats in the recent times.
In the recent times, no,
Okay.
not really. Yeah.
So you plan to stay on in Chhattisgarh or move on?
Actually, to tell you the truth, my Chhattisgarh is Bastar
Okay.
because I don't really go out of Bastar
Right.
almost. I mean, Bastar itself has 7 districts.
Yes.
And there's so much happening here that one is not able to also go to other parts of Chhattisgarh.
Right.
So I'm that way. I say sort of humorously maybe that I've become now a frog in the Bastar well. So yes, I intend to stay here.
Okay.
I've moved in Bastar. When I moved in January, early January 2015, I moved lock, stock, and barrel. So I
Okay.
don't have any other home anywhere else.
Right.
This is my home. So I have moved here with the intention of being here, yeah,
Okay.
living here and working here.
So more power to you and all the best for your work. So thanks so much.
Sure. Thanks.
Take care. Take care. Be safe.
Many thanks for this conversation.